Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we are going to take an up-close and personal look at Commander Shinomiya's insides. All right, so we have Commander Shinomiya, the Director General of the Defense Force. Now, there's something very interesting that I've noticed in the few images we've had of him so far. And not to bury the lead, I don't think that the good Director General is very long for this world. Now, why do I say that? Well, I grew up on a farm. When you have animals, you have certain animals that will let you know when they're injured, that will come up to you. They will, in fact, exaggerate their injuries. But for the most part, animals don't do that. You have to watch animals carefully because they will try to hide when they are injured, especially if you have a working dog. Now, if you've trained the dog to bring their injuries to you, they might, but there are certain types of very intelligent, stubborn dogs like Huskies, Marmaras, Great Pyrenees. They want to do their job. It's what they've been bred for. It's what they live for. And if they know, and they're more than smart enough to know this, that you're going to stop them from doing their job if you know that they're injured, it's very logical for them to hide their injuries. And for the less intelligent animals, ducks, cats, any of those animals that live in a social environment where weakness can get them killed, they will absolutely hide them. So when you grow up around animals, you learn to watch for signs of age, of weakness, of injury. And it's subtle, but it's definitely there with Commander Shinomiya. First off, his face is just craggy. This man is old, he's had a hard life, but that could be just age. But in the first panel, we really see him up close, and he's just sitting at a desk. But he's sitting, leaning forward with his elbows resting on the desk, which is somewhat unusual for a military commander. His shoulders are slightly hunched and more sloped than you'd expect. Most military officers are trained to sit very rigid and straight in their seats, especially if they're in a meeting. Now, that by itself wouldn't mean much of anything, but there's more. So as we see Director General Shinomiya in the next chapter, chapter 34, we actually get to see him moving around and interacting with others a little more. And again, we see him at his desk, and he's leaning forward, and he's sitting very stiffly. Now, this is very in tune with the conversation he's having here. He's having a very unpleasant conversation with his daughter Kikoru, but there's very, very little movement in his body, and this is telling because this artist is very, very good at drawing movement. And like, take a look at any scene that Hoshina is in, Vice Captain Hoshina, where he's not like actively being injured or restrained. All of these characters show very distinct signs of movement, but Director Shinomiya is sitting here just rigid and stiff and still. And yes, this is a visual representation of how we're supposed to see his relationship with his daughter, and by itself it wouldn't mean much. But again, there's just very little movement. He slides the notepaper across to her. His arm is stiff when he's holding the pen, signing the documents. He barely lifts his eyes to look up at her. Every movement this man makes is considered, is calm. And then we see the scene where he marches into the room to confront Kafka. Now, this is probably the biggest scene that sent off the triggers in my head. This man is injured. This man is in pain. And I don't think it's anything recent or fresh. These are probably just very old injuries. Now, how he got these injuries we'll go into, other than the fact that he's in the Defense Force and he's taken a beating his entire career. But how he got those, we'll go into it. But anyway, he's very stiff. His shoulders are very stiff. His body is very straight. Now, you say that this might be just an aspect of his military training, but look at the soldiers behind him. Even the ones who are carrying heavy loads or holding weapons are much looser, more fluid. And he is just... Director Shinomiya here, he's just rigid. And again, this is a visual representation of his willpower, but there are other ways to do that other than making his movements look so restrained. And on two pages over, we get a scene where he turns to look at somebody and he rotates his eyes all the way over to the corner of his sockets and he barely turns his head. This is just limited movement of the neck. Logical. And then when he turns to fire at Kafka, in the scene where he shoots the bullets at him, he does not turn his body fully sideways. He's showing at least I'd say 60% of the width of his chest. Now, someone who's used to firing a weapon in a controlled situation where he sets up the shot himself, he would turn his body completely sideways. But he doesn't appear to be able to turn his neck that far. And I think it's very interesting that his uniform offers support all the way up the back of his neck. So I think we might be looking at a series of spinal injuries here, concentrated in some heavy damage around the neck. Now, where did this come from? Now, we get that answer in the next chapter, chapter 35, when he opens up his punching machine. Now, this is a machine that can deliver inhuman amounts of power, hydraulic power, and of course, the machine itself is handling most of this power. But when you look at the pages where it shows it clearly how it attaches to his body, it wraps around his back and his spine. Every single time he uses this thing, his arms are completely encased. You have a tremendous amount of force going around and across his body. And it's pulling on his arms, straining them. And for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's one of the fundamental rules of physics, and this show pays a lot of attention to physics. Every time he punches something, an equal and opposite force is traveling backwards through his body. Now, with Mina's big gun, she has her tiger to brace herself against, and the gun also has a backwash to counter the force. These gauntlets, they seem to have a few of those similar safety features now, but remember, these gauntlets came from kaiju number 2, meaning they were only the second weapon created from these big monstrous kaiju, and Commander Shinomiya is the only one who's ever been able to wield them. So he probably had the prototype, just like Private Shinomiya, Kikoru, does now in that axe. Only these punching things that wrap entirely around your arms and put that massive amount of concussive damage to your spine, and compressive damage as well. This man has taken a beating his entire life. I would imagine that he's constantly in pain, that his movements are constantly constrained, and that getting out there and duking it out with Kafka is really, really telling on him. And he's only doing it because there's no other choice at the moment. So, that's kind of my point. These gauntlets have been aggravating whatever other damage he took when battling the kaiju. So I've been assuming he wore these gauntlets for a good part of his career. They would have come off kaiju number 2 as only the second super weapon to be made from the kaiju, the first being kaiju number 1. And then who knows what they were doing to him when he first started using them. I imagine they might have nearly killed or paralyzed him that first time. In fact, it's quite possible, given the healing technology and regenerative technology that they've developed from the kaiju, that Commander Shinomiya has taken damage to his spine that in our modern real-life era would have been paralyzing. But they've managed to bring him back from them. And so, that it's not a huge thing, but I think it's really, really great storytelling. If you look at this man's past, the monsters that he's faced, the damage that he's taken, and it was such a fascinating detail for an artist to remember to put into a manga. It just shows how much effort they're putting into telling the best story that they can tell. This man punches things. They probably went and took the damage that you find in professional boxers or old MMA fighters, and they scaled it up. And they understood that that would give him this really weird, rigid movement style of a wounded animal that's trying to hide its injuries from the rest of the herd, of that old war dog who's trying to finish his task before he gets taken out by his handlers and put out to pasture, as it were. And again, I just think this really, really tells to the skill of the artists and the storytellers, because they say that was a conscious choice. Okay, this man, his weapon of choice was a prototype that puts a super amount of stress on his body. He has spine damage. He's continuing to serve. He doesn't want to retire just yet, and therefore he would have this stiff movement where he is hiding the chronic injury and constant pain that he's in. And again, that's just excellent storytelling. So, if you want some not so good storytelling to hold you over till the next chapter drops, you can check out the links below the video. Humans are weird. I have the data. available on Amazon, Kobo by Rakuten, Barnes & Noble, and Google Play Books, and of course you can get an author-signed copy if you want. Just email me as instructed on the website. Now, you can also go and check out Dying Embers, Dragons, Aliens, and Things That Go Boom in the Night, only available on Amazon, or an author-signed first edition if you want to email me. Okay, and that's it. Peace out, my wonderful viewers.
The book from author Betty Adams, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, is a humorous look at human behavior through the eyes of aliens. This book is arranged in separate reports or essays, documenting the experiences with humanity through the lens of the aliens who have to interact with them. This anthology of short stories and vignettes from alien points of view highlights some of humanity's quirks we can all relate to. Author Betty Adams captures how strange and interesting humans can really be. This is a fun collection of stories you will really get a kick out of. Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, from author Betty Adams. Order your copy right now on Amazon.